So you want to buy a used 350Z. What's up everybody, I'm Austin, and today we're going to talk about what you should look for before you start your next project. There's a big list of things you want to look at before you buy any used car, and a lot of these are kind of generic and they follow any car you would look at. But today we're going to talk about things that specifically apply to the 350Z. All right, we're going to divide this up into three categories: body and exterior, suspension, and drivetrain. And let's start with the body and exterior. So one of the simple things that commonly gets overlooked, especially if you're buying it by yourself, is the door handles. 350Z, it's very common for the latch on the back side of these plastic door handles to snap. So when you're looking at it, make sure you hit the driver's side, look at the passenger side. It's an easy repair, but something you definitely want to take note of when you're looking at a used car. Next to that is going to be the headlights. And although, again, this may seem like a simple thing that you would just kind of assume, 350Zs, if it has a headlight out, you may just assume it's the bulb, but it could be the ballast on the back side of the headlight housing. It's very common, and a lot of these are discontinued. There are some aftermarket companies that you can go to, or you can try to find yourself a used pair. And just to give you a heads up, they can range from anywhere $100 up to $500–600 we've seen for like the 06, 07 HIDs. So again, another negotiating tool you might want to be aware of if you're buying a used one. All right, let's go ahead and jump on to suspension. So one of the most common ones that you need to look for on any 350Z, and this also includes G35, is the front lower control arm bushing. That thing loves to fail, honestly, before 100,000 miles, especially if it's been driven hard. And actually we have some down here in the shop that have a bad set. So let's go take a look at that. So now we're underneath Dave's car. Yeah, I'm sure a few of you guessed because it's always Dave's car. And lower control arm bushings. So if you look here, this one's not too bad. It's getting there. Kind of come up to this angle. This arm should be centered right here in this kind of gap in the subframe with the bushing right here in the middle. And you can see it's starting to go a little towards the forward side. What happens is this bushing ends up failing, and it ends up getting kind of like spit out of this joint of the arm, because if you come over to the driver's side, classic. So the bushing's been spit out, the arm's right up against the front of the subframe. And what does that mean? So when that happens, it's not like, it kind of usually stays in place. It doesn't move back and forth. You're not going to hear a clunk, but what it will do is mean your alignment is complete trash. So even if you take it to an alignment shop, they may be able to get it close to spec. It's probably not going to stay there because there is still a little bit of wiggle room. The good thing about that is you can drop it. That bushing's already out. Usually you can take a hammer or like a socket about the same size, put it on top and just kind of slam it out. On our website, zeomotorsports.com, we can sell you replacement arms with bushing in it. We can sell you energy suspension is usually like the best kind of go-to. Super push in together, you no need for a press, really easy to do at home. But yeah, definitely something to look forward to because this is on almost every used 350Z I've ever seen. All right, number 2 on the list for suspension, differential bushing. So the factory diff bushing is a rubber bushing, and it's filled with kind of like a hydraulic fluid to help dampen the noise and vibration and all that. And it's known as the tear of death. When that rubber breaks, you get fluid running down, and actually that same car we were just under, let's go take another look. All right, so we're back under the car again, and differential bushing. So this is also super common, just like the front lowers. Diff bushing, like I said, it's rubber, fluid filled. And what this thing ends up doing is getting the tear of death, so to speak. And you can see the witness marks of the black fluid where it ran down and then kind of came out. So what that means is this diff is in this subframe only by one stud. That stud that goes through the middle of this bushing right here. And if you're like doing heavy driving, you know, kind of performance stuff, or worse, launches, that's me how I know, the additional play in here will mean you will shear the stud. You will more than likely break the stud out of the cover, so you got to replace the cover of the differential as well. And when that breaks, the whole diff falls out, which means it rips your axles out. And yeah, nobody wants to be in that position. So definitely take a look at the differential bushing. We have our own. We even sell a tool to help you get that factory one out because it's got a big metal sleeve that is like press fit into the subframe. And if you don't have that tool, you can get it out and you're gonna have a hard time doing it. So we try to make it a little bit easier for you. And a little honorable mention here, what we did for Dave in the meantime, which we're doing a video on that differential bushing here soon, is gave him a diff brace. There's an additional hole that's already in this subframe. So we just utilize that, put this brace on it. The brace fits this factory cover, Nismo cover, Z1 cover, all of them. And this buys him a little bit of time. That way he can get out, he can still have fun in the car and not worrying about shearing that stud off the diff. Final bushing you're gonna wanna take a look at are your front compression rod bushings. That arm kind of goes up to the back part of the front subframe. And this one is a little bit harder to diagnose. Like you're not necessarily gonna feel it in the front, but it's sometimes accompanied with some clunking, that kind of thing. And again, we got another example. So rather than just sitting here talking about it, let's go take another look. All right, so compression rod bushings. This is your compression rod here, goes to the subframe right here. You can see the lower part of the rubber kind of up close there. Visually, what you're gonna do is come up and just look for cracks. These things like to deteriorate, so you'll kind of get a little bit of wiggle in the wheel. What one of the technicians, Sean, said you can do is kind of get the car like just a little bit off the ground, and you can use like a breaker bar, pry bar, you know, something like that, and wedge it up against the bottom of the tire in the ground and kind of leverage it, push it, and try to see if you can get it to move forward or backwards, not up and down, forward or backwards. And it might move just a little bit. I mean, you'll feel it. If there's like good tension on it, then that's the bushing doing its job. I mean, if you got a decent amount of play, then that's something you may want to consider and look at. But yeah, the best thing to do is that, and kind of just a visual inspection, see if it's cracking, touch it, see if it's brittle. And yeah, that's it for the compression rod bushing. All right, our last and final category is gonna be mechanical. So not necessarily for DE, although it can happen sometimes, but mainly for HR guys, gallery gaskets. You've heard about it, I'm sure you've seen about it, if you've done your research. HRs and VHRs getting into 370s. The gallery gasket is a paper gasket. It's continuously around heat, soaks with oil, it breaks down, they spit the gasket out. So one thing when you're looking at a used car, what you want to do is get it up to operating temp. You know, you're out on your test drive, you're looking at it and everything. You do have an oil pressure gauge up on the dash. And what you're going to want to look at is if you're idle at op temp, your pressure is, you know, anything below like 10 to 12 PSI, you need to change those gallery gaskets. And that will be a huge negotiating tool for you because core support's got to come off, assuming you're not taking the motor out. Front timing's off. While you're in there, you're gonna do things like the chain, the tensioner, the water pump, and that's a very big deal, especially if you're looking at a car to spend, you know, $5,000 to $6,000. There's half of it in just labor if you're not doing it yourself. So definitely a huge thing to look for and very detrimental to HRs and VHRs if you don't get it looked at. Another thing on the mechanical side is DE versus rev up. Rev up is notorious for consuming oil. They like to rod knock, I've been there. And what a lot of guys will do is when they blow their rev up, they'll actually swap in a DE. One thing to help you identify whether it's a DE or a rev up is on the front timing cover. As Spencer likes to say, DE has Millennium Falcon. Yeah, we'll put that up there. Little front cam cover looks like Millennium Falcon. On rev up, it's a little different, and you'll also see connectors go to these front covers. If you see connectors, you got a rev up. If you don't, it's a DE. And just look up your year, look what engine should have came in the car, and if it's different, you know it's obviously been messed with, which it all depends on what you're doing with the car. If you're drifting the car, you may not care. If you want something to keep, you know, original and have fun with as like a weekend warrior, this may matter to you. So all of this is situational. Another simple thing that honestly you should look at for any used car, but is a big thing for 350Zs, valve covers love to leak. So not a huge deal, easy to replace in a couple of hours, just out in your garage, but something you need to look for. All right, so enough with the engine, going to the transmission. You guys have heard CDOs, CDO9. These transmissions are great. They love to hold power. That's why CDO9 is one of the most commonly swapped transmission for DE. 2J, a lot of LS guys use it. I mean, there's even swap kits for S2000s for CD09s in there. One thing that we've kind of seen though is as these things get older and you put a lot of wear and tear on them, third and fifth gear synchros, they do like to develop a little bit of a notch when you get in there. So when you're out on your test drive, you're going through it, get the RPMs up and, make sure third and fifth. Haven't really seen any problems with 1, 2, and 4 or 6, but third and fifth are usually your first two to kind of show signs, particularly fifth. So very common in used 350Zs, you get in or you'll see listings, everything good, runs fine, fifth gear scratch. That's what they're talking about. So again, another negotiating tool if you need it. All right, so that's gonna wrap up the list on key specific issues you need to look for when buying a used 350Z. These cars are getting almost 20 years old, so make sure you go through your meticulous and look over everything. And don't forget, all of these things that I listed, if you end up finding a car that does have these issues, there's always a solution. You can always head on over to z1motorsports.com and everything that we pointed out in this video, we have a product for. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment on what video you would like us to make next.